Captain Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched his crew load the last cargo container onto the mining ship. The metal scraped against metal, making a sound that echoed through the empty space dock. His men worked fast, but Jake could see the worry in their eyes. Everyone knew something was wrong. The mining operation on Kepler 442b had been going well for 3 months. His crew had pulled more rare metals from the planet's surface than any human team in the sector. But yesterday, everything changed. The consortium ships had arrived without warning. Jake looked at his watch. The alien enforcers would be here, soon. He turned to his second-in-command, Bill Harper, who was checking the cargo manifest on his tablet. "How much do we have loaded?" Jake asked. 47 tons of platinum, 32 tons of rare earth metals, and about 15 tons of processed titanium, Bill replied. His voice was steady, but Jake noticed his hands shaking slightly. "That should be enough to meet their demands," Jake said, though he did not believe his own words. The dock suddenly filled with a low humming sound. The consortium ships were arriving. Jake watched through the window as 3 massive vessels descended from the darkness of space. They were sleek and black, with strange symbols glowing along their sides. The aliens called them enforcement ships, but to Jake they looked like weapons of war. The lead ship landed with a heavy thud that shook the entire dock. A ramp extended from its belly, and figures began walking down. The consortium enforcers were tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed to glow in the artificial light. They wore dark uniforms with metal plates covering their chests. Their eyes were large and black, showing no emotion. The lead enforcer approached. "Jake?" When it spoke, its voice came through a translation device that made it sound cold and mechanical. "Captain Morrison, you will surrender 50% of all extracted materials. This is effective immediately." Jake felt his heart sink. 50% was impossible. The mining operation barely made enough profit to keep running as it was. If they took half of everything, his crew would not be able to buy food or fuel for the return trip to Earth. "Sir, with respect, that was not our agreement," Jake said carefully. "The consortium treaty states that human colonies pay 20% tribute on all mining operations." The enforcer tilted its head. The movement was quick and strange, like a bird watching prey. "The treaty has been revised. You will comply immediately." Behind the lead enforcer, Jake counted 12 more aliens. They carried weapons that looked like long metal rods, but Jake knew they could kill a human with one shot. His crew had stopped working and was watching the conversation. Some of them had their hands near the tools on their belts, but Jake knew it would be suicide to fight. "I need to contact Earth Command," Jake said. "This change requires approval from—" "No." The enforcer's voice cut through his words like a knife. "You will comply now, or face immediate consequences." Bill Harper stepped forward. Jake tried to stop him, but his friend was already speaking. "This is robbery," Bill said, his voice getting louder. "You people have been bleeding us dry for decades. We mine your metals, we follow your laws, we pay your taxes. When does it end?" Other crew members began nodding. Jake could see the anger building in their faces. These were good men who had worked hard their entire lives, only to watch aliens take most of what they earned. The lead enforcer raised one thin hand. The other aliens lifted their weapons. 12 humans will now be executed as an example of the consequences of disobedience. Jake felt the world slow down around him. He opened his mouth to speak, to beg, to offer anything that might save his crew. But before he could say a word, the aliens fired. 12 beams of white light filled the dock. 12 good men fell to the ground and did not get up again. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. Jake heard someone scream, but he could not tell if it was one of his remaining crew or himself. The lead enforcer looked at Jake with those black, emotionless eyes. "The revised tribute will be collected immediately. Any further resistance will result in the termination of all remaining humans." Jake nodded slowly. His hands were shaking now, and he could taste blood in his mouth from biting his tongue. The surviving crew members began loading half of their cargo onto the consortium ships. No one spoke. No one looked at the bodies on the floor. When the aliens left, Jake sat alone in his captain's chair. He activated the communication system and sent a message to Earth Command. His voice was steady as he reported what had happened, but inside he felt something breaking. 3 days later, Jake received a message that changed everything. It came from Admiral Lisa Carter on Earth, and it was being broadcast to every human ship, every colony, every settlement in space. This is Admiral Carter of Earth Command. I regret to inform you that the consortium has destroyed the colony world of New Texas. 2 million human civilians are dead. The aliens claimed we exceeded permitted population growth rates. Jake gripped his chair as the message continued. The consortium has also increased tribute demands across all human territories. They are demanding surrender of our defensive weapons and placement of alien overseers on all human worlds. There was a long pause. When Admiral Carter spoke again, her voice was different, harder, effective immediately. All human forces are to disregard consortium authority. We will no longer kneel before these creatures. We will no longer beg for the right to exist. Humanity says enough. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked at his surviving crew members, who had gathered around the communication console. Their faces showed the same mix of fear and determination that he felt. All human ships are to return to their nearest military base for reassignment, the Admiral continued. We fight or we die free. There is no third option. The message ended with a simple code phrase that every human in space had been waiting to hear for decades: Phoenix Rising. Jake stood up and looked at his crew. These men had just watched their friends die. They had been humiliated and robbed by creatures who saw them as nothing more than useful animals. But in their eyes, Jake saw something the aliens had not expected to find. He saw the fire of a species that had finally been pushed too far. Jake turned to his communications officer. Send a reply to Earth Command. Tell them the mining ship Defiance is ready for orders. Outside the window, stars filled the darkness of space. Somewhere among those stars, alien ships were celebrating their easy victory over the primitive humans. They had no idea that they had just awakened something far more dangerous than they could imagine. The war had begun. Dr. Amy Rodriguez stood in the center of the secret facility, buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. Around her, hundreds of scientists and engineers worked at computer stations that glowed with blue light. For 20 years, she had been waiting for this moment. Phoenix Initiative is now active, she announced over the facility's communication system. All projects are approved for immediate deployment. The Phoenix Initiative had been humanity's greatest secret. While the aliens thought humans were simple miners and farmers, the best minds on Earth had been developing weapons and technology in hidden laboratories. They had studied captured alien equipment, reverse-engineered their technology, and created weapons designed specifically to kill consortium forces. Amy walked to a massive display screen that showed the layout of human space. Red dots marked alien positions while blue dots showed human ships and colonies. Right now, the aliens outnumbered humans by more than 10 to 1. But Amy knew something the consortium did not. Humans had never fought a real war using their full capabilities. Dr. Rodriguez called out her assistant, Mark Chen. We're receiving confirmation from all hidden facilities. The weapon manufacturing plants are online. The new ships are ready for launch. Amy nodded. In secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, humans had been building a new type of warship. These vessels use something called ghost drive technology that made them nearly invisible to alien sensors. They were smaller than consortium ships but much faster and more difficult to hit. On the other side of the facility, Admiral Lisa Carter was meeting with her top commanders. The Admiral was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been planning this war for decades, knowing that one day the aliens would push humanity too far. Gentlemen, she said to the officers gathered around a holographic display, the consortium thinks they're dealing with the same humans who surrendered 40 years ago. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Commander Pete Johnson raised his hand. He was young for a ship commander, but he had trained his entire life for this moment. Admiral, what are our orders? Your ship, the Retribution, will lead the first strike, Admiral Carter replied. Target, The consortium supply depot at Proxima Centauri. Show them that humans can bite back. Pete nodded. His ship was one of the new Ghost Drive vessels. It could travel faster than any consortium ship and strike without warning. More importantly, it carried weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Meanwhile, in the Luna shipyards near Earth's moon, Captain Kelly Brooks was preparing for the defense of humanity's most important manufacturing center. Intelligence. Reports suggested the consortium was sending a large fleet to destroy the shipyards and cripple human military production. Kelly was checking the weapons systems on her ship when her communications officer brought her a message. Captain, we're detecting 60 consortium ships approaching the system. They'll be here in 4 hours. Kelly looked at her small fleet of 12 ships. Any sane person would have ordered an immediate retreat, but Kelly was not any person. She was a human who had just watched aliens murder civilians and demand the surrender of her species. Signal all ships, she ordered. We're not running. We're going to show these aliens what humans do when we're angry. The consortium fleet was led by General Vexthar, a creature that had been conquering worlds for over 300 years. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display with satisfaction. 60 ships against 12 primitive human vessels. It would be over in minutes. General, reported his sensor officer, the human ships are not retreating. They appear to be moving to attack positions. Vexthar made a sound that was the alien equivalent of laughter. Foolish creatures. They have learned nothing from their defeats. Destroy them all. What happened next changed the course of the war. Commander Johnson's ship struck the supply depot at Proxima Centauri like a ghost appearing from nowhere. The ghost drive allowed his ship to appear inside the alien defensive perimeter without being detected. By the time the consortium forces realized they were under attack, half their supply ships were already destroyed. Johnson's crew worked with the precision of a machine. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. Human weapons, designed specifically to penetrate alien shields, tore through enemy defenses like they were made of paper. Target their command ship, Johnson ordered. Take out their communications. The Retribution's main weapon fired a beam of concentrated energy that sliced through the alien command vessel like a hot knife through butter. Without central coordination, the remaining consortium ships began firing wildly, hitting their own forces as often as they hit Johnson's ship. At the same time, Captain Brooks was demonstrating a new type of human warfare. Instead of fighting the alien fleet in a traditional battle, her ships used what she called swarm tactics. The human vessels moved in coordinated groups, appearing from different directions simultaneously. The consortium ships were designed to fight large battles between massive fleets. They were not prepared for fast, small ships that attacked and disappeared before they could respond. Kelly's crews had studied alien technology for decades and knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. Focus fire on their shield generators, Kelly commanded. Once their shields are down, target their weapon systems. One by one, the massive consortium ships began to fall. Their weapons could not track the fast-moving human vessels, and their shields could not protect against weapons specifically designed to defeat them. General Vexthar watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart by forces he had considered primitive. His sensors could barely track the human ships, and his weapons seemed to have no effect on them. How is this possible? He demanded. These are humans. They have no advanced technology. His tactical officer's voice was filled with panic. Sir, we've lost 40 ships. The humans are using technology we've never seen before. Their weapons are specifically designed to penetrate our defenses. Vexthar realized he was witnessing something that had not happened in over 1,000 years. The consortium was losing a battle to a supposedly inferior species. Signal the remaining ships, he ordered. Full retreat. We must report this to the High Council immediately. Of the 60 ships that had attacked Luna, only 3 escaped to tell the story. The message they carried spread through the consortium faster than their leaders could suppress it. For the first time in millennia, the master race had been defeated by their slaves. Dr. Rodriguez received the battle reports in her underground facility. The first phase of humanity's war had been a complete success, but she knew this was only the beginning. Mark, she called to her assistant. Activate all sleeper cells in consortium space. It's time to wake up every human who's been waiting for this day. Across the galaxy, humans who had spent decades pretending to be loyal servants began to reveal their true nature. Hidden weapons caches were opened, secret communication networks came online, and for the first time in 40 years, humans began to fight back with everything they had. The consortium had ruled the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had never faced a species that preferred death to slavery. The war machine of humanity was awakening, and nothing would ever be the same. The news of humanity's victory at Luna spread across the galaxy faster than the consortium could stop it. On dozens of worlds, alien species that had been slaves for centuries heard the impossible story. The humans had defeated 60 consortium ships with only 12 vessels. For the first time in 1,000 years, their masters had tasted defeat. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the war room on Earth, studying holographic displays that showed the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated consortium strongholds, while blue showed human positions. What she was planning had never been attempted before in galactic history. Operation Sledgehammer begins in 6 hours, she announced to her commanders. We will hit them everywhere at once. By the time they understand what's happening, it will be too late to stop us. Sledgehammer was humanity's plan to strike at multiple consortium targets simultaneously. While the aliens scrambled to understand how they had lost at Luna, human forces would attack their most important military installations across 3 sectors of space. Colonel Frank Williams checked his equipment one final time. He commanded the ground forces assigned to capture Rigel Prime, the planet where the consortium trained their military officers. It was considered the most heavily defended world in their empire, protected by orbital weapons platforms and an army of 50,000 alien soldiers. Frank's force consisted of only 3,000 humans, but they carried weapons and armor that the consortium had never seen. Each soldier wore powered armor that made them as strong as a small tank. Their weapons could punch through alien defenses like they were made of cardboard. Remember, Frank told his troops as they prepared to board their assault ships, we're not just fighting for Earth. Every species in this galaxy is watching. Show them what humans can do. The assault on Rigel Prime began at dawn. Human ships appeared in orbit without warning, using their ghost drive technology to bypass the planet's early warning systems. The orbital defense platforms opened fire, but human weapons had been specifically designed to destroy them. Frank's troops landed in the middle of the alien military academy. The consortium soldiers had trained for hundreds of different battle scenarios, but they had never faced an enemy like humans. The alien defenders moved in precise formations and followed ancient tactical doctrines. The humans fought like wild animals, using every dirty trick they could think of. Covering fire! Frank shouted as his squad advanced through the academy's main courtyard. Alien weapons fired at them, but the energy beams could not penetrate their armor. Human weapons responded with devastating effect, each shot calculated to cause maximum damage. The alien commander tried to coordinate a defense, but human tactics made no sense to him. Instead of fighting in organized lines, the humans split into small groups that attacked from every direction. They used the Academy's own buildings as cover, turning the aliens' home ground against them. Within 6 hours, Frank's forces had captured the entire planet. The Alien Military Academy, which had been training consortium officers for over 2,000 years, was now under human control. At the same time, Dr. Amy Rodriguez was overseeing the deployment of humanity's most devastating weapon. Deep in her underground laboratory, she watched as technicians made final adjustments to something called the resonance cascade. The device is ready, Doctor, reported her chief engineer. All tests show it will work exactly as designed. The resonance cascade was humanity's answer to consortium shield technology. The aliens protected their most important worlds with energy barriers that could stop any known weapon. But human scientists had discovered that these shields had a fundamental weakness. If hit with the right frequency of energy, they would simply stop working. The target was Terminus, a fortress world that controlled 3 major shipping routes. The consortium considered it completely impregnable. Massive shield generators surrounded the planet, creating a barrier that had never been penetrated in over 500 years. Commander Pete Johnson approached Terminus with a single ship carrying the resonance cascade. His mission was simple: get close enough to activate the device and destroy the shields. What happened after that would be up to the main attack fleet. Approaching the target, Johnson reported to Admiral Carter. Enemy shields are at full power. Beginning activation sequence. The resonance cascade fired a beam of energy that looked harmless compared to normal weapons. It struck the planetary shields and seemed to have no effect. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the shields began to flicker. The energy barrier that had protected Terminus for centuries started to vibrate. Within minutes, the entire shield network collapsed. "Shields are down," Johnson reported. "Repeat, Terminus shields are down." The human attack fleet struck immediately. Without their protective barrier, the fortress world's defenses crumbled in hours. Another supposedly impregnable consortium stronghold had fallen to human forces. But the aliens were not helpless. The High Council of the consortium met an emergency session as reports of human victories poured in from across their empire. These creatures they had dismissed as primitive slaves were systematically destroying their most important military positions. "The humans must be stopped," declared Overlord Kethtar, the supreme leader of the consortium. "Deploy the planet-killer weapons. Show them the price of rebellion." The consortium's response was swift and brutal. 3 human colony worlds simply vanished in balls of fire as alien doomsday weapons struck them from space. Billions of human civilians died in minutes. The message was clear: surrender, or watch your species burn. But humanity's response was even more devastating. Captain Jake Morrison, the mining ship commander who had witnessed the first alien atrocity, now commanded a fleet of stealth ships. While the consortium celebrated their destruction of human colonies, Morrison's fleet was already moving toward their capital system. "Remember those men they killed on my ship," Morrison told his crews. "Remember the colonies they just destroyed. No mercy." Morrison's ships used their ghost drive technology to infiltrate the most heavily protected system in the galaxy. The consortium capital was surrounded by thousands of defensive platforms and protected by the largest fleet in their empire. But human stealth technology made Morrison's ships effectively invisible. The target was the Central Command Nexus, a massive space station that coordinated all consortium military operations across the galaxy. If it was destroyed, their entire command structure would collapse. Morrison's ship struck without warning. The first the aliens knew of the attack was when their command station began to explode. Human weapons, designed specifically to cause maximum damage to consortium technology, tore through the station's defenses like they were made of tissue paper. "Target their main computer core," Morrison ordered. "Make sure they can't coordinate their forces." The Central Command Nexus died in a ball of fire that could be seen from planets across the system. With it died the consortium's ability to control their vast empire. Without central coordination, their forces began to lose contact with each other. News of the command station's destruction spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly realized that their masters were not invincible. If humans could destroy the Central Command Nexus, maybe freedom was possible. On a dozen worlds, slave revolts began. The Carillion species, who had been forced to serve as biological computers for 2,000 years, suddenly turned their bioships against their former masters. The crystalline Vorthak, enslaved for their mathematical abilities, began providing tactical assistance to human forces. Even some consortium member species began to question their loyalty. Reports of human treatment of prisoners, human willingness to fight alongside other species as equals, and human promises of freedom for all slaves created doubt among aliens who had supported the Empire. Dr. Rodriguez watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. What had begun as humanity's war for independence was becoming something much larger. It was becoming a revolution that would reshape the entire galaxy. "Mark," she called to her assistant, "send a message to Admiral Carter. Tell her it's time for Phase 2. Phase 2 was humanity's plan to liberate every enslaved species in the galaxy. They would not stop with their own freedom. They would tear down the entire system that had kept billions of beings in chains. The Consortium High Council watched their empire begin to crumble and realized they faced a choice. They could negotiate with the humans and try to maintain some of their power, or they could fight to the end and risk losing everything. They chose to fight. What they did not understand was that humans had been waiting for that choice their entire lives. General Nathan Cross stood on the bridge of his assault ship as it approached the industrial world of Forge Prime. Below him stretched a planet covered in massive factories and mining operations, where billions of slaves from dozens of species had worked for centuries. Today they would be free. "General," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving signals from the surface. The slaves are ready to help us." Nathan smiled grimly. Word of human victories had spread to every corner of the galaxy, carried by secret networks that the consortium had never discovered. On world after world, enslaved beings were preparing to rise up against their masters. The liberation of Forge Prime was crucial to humanity's war effort. The planet contained the largest manufacturing facilities in the consortium empire. If humans could capture it intact, they would have enough industrial capacity to build a fleet that could challenge the aliens across the entire galaxy. "Begin the assault," Nathan ordered. "Remember, we're not just liberating a planet, we're freeing an entire civilization." Human dropships descended through the planet's atmosphere like falling stars, but instead of facing organized resistance, they found slave populations ready to fight alongside them. Carillion bioships, their living hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, joined the human fleet. Crystalline Vorthak provided tactical calculations that improved human accuracy by 30%. The consortium garrison on Forge Prime numbered 50,000 troops. But they were facing not just human soldiers but millions of slaves who had been waiting lifetimes for this moment. The battle was over in 12 hours. Nathan walked through the liberated factories, watching as beings from 100 different worlds celebrated their freedom. Some wept tears of joy. Others simply stood in silence, unable to believe their nightmare was finally over. General Cross called out a tall insectoid creature that approached him. "I am Hive Speaker Zektar of the Carillion Collective. My people offer our bioships to your cause." Nathan shook the alien's extended claw. "Welcome to the Free Species Alliance." The Free Species Alliance had been President Ryan Walsh's idea. Instead of replacing the consortium with human rule, Earth would create a government where every species had equal representation. The message was spreading across the galaxy. Humans were not conquerors. They were liberators. President Walsh himself was in the war room on Earth, meeting with representatives from dozens of species that had joined the alliance. The holographic display showed a galaxy in chaos. Consortium forces were losing ground everywhere as more species rose in rebellion. "The situation is developing faster than we anticipated," Walsh told the assembled representatives. "But we need to be careful. The consortium still has enough firepower to destroy entire star systems." His words proved prophetic. That same day, intelligence reports arrived that chilled every human leader to the bone. Admiral Lisa Carter read the decoded transmission with growing horror. "They're activating the Terminus Protocol," she announced to her staff. "The consortium is preparing to use their super weapons." The Terminus Protocol was something humans had heard rumors about but never confirmed. Ancient weapons, built by the first consortium overlords millions of years ago, capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The aliens had kept them as a final option, a way to ensure that if they could not rule the galaxy, no one could. Commander Pete Johnson discovered the truth during a raid on a consortium data facility. His team had been searching for tactical information when they uncovered files that revealed the full scope of the aliens' desperation. "Admiral," Johnson reported via secure communication, "you need to see this. The consortium has 47 planet-killer weapons positioned throughout the galaxy. They're planning to activate all of them simultaneously." The implications were staggering. If the consortium triggered the Terminus Protocol, billions of worlds would die. Every species that had joined the rebellion would be wiped out. The galaxy would become a lifeless wasteland ruled by the few consortium worlds that survived. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to develop countermeasures. But the ancient weapons were based on technology that was millions of years old, far more advanced than anything humans had yet encountered. "We need more time," she told Admiral Carter during an emergency conference. These weapons work by destabilizing stars themselves. If they activate them, we can't stop the chain reaction. Admiral Carter made the hardest decision of her life. Then we don't stop them. We stop the people who control them. The plan was insane. Human forces would launch simultaneous attacks on every consortium core world, attempting to capture or destroy the control systems for the terminus weapons before they could be activated. It meant splitting human forces across dozens of star systems and fighting the aliens' most heavily defended positions with minimal backup. Captain Kelly Brooks volunteered to lead the most dangerous mission. Intelligence suggested that the primary control center for the Terminus Protocol was located on Consortium Prime, the Empire's capital world. It was protected by the largest fleet in the galaxy and orbital defenses that had never been breached. "This is a suicide mission," Kelly told her crew as they prepared for departure. "If anyone wants to transfer to another ship, now is the time." Not a single crew member requested transfer. Kelly's fleet was the largest human force ever assembled. 3,000 ships carrying the best pilots, soldiers, and scientists humanity had to offer. They represented 40 years of preparation and the combined hopes of every free species in the galaxy. The journey to Consortium Prime took 6 days. As they traveled, reports came in from other human forces. Some missions succeeded brilliantly, others ended in disaster. The fate of the galaxy would depend on whether enough control centers could be captured before the aliens activated their doomsday weapons. On the 5th day, Kelly received a message that changed everything. Captain Jake Morrison, commanding a reconnaissance fleet, had discovered something extraordinary. "Kelly," Morrison reported, "we've found the central control station. It's not on any planet. They built it inside a mobile space fortress. The entire Terminus Protocol can be controlled from a single location." The fortress was called the Final Authority, a massive space station larger than most moons. It was protected by energy shields that made Terminus look defenseless and guarded by a fleet of 1,000 ships. But it was also the key to saving the galaxy. Admiral Carter made the decision immediately. "All human forces will converge on the Final Authority. This is our chance to end the war." Kelly's fleet changed course, joined by every human ship that could reach them in time. As they approached the alien fortress, they knew they were facing the most important battle in galactic history. The Final Authority's commander was Overlord Kethtar himself, the supreme leader of the consortium. He watched the approaching human fleet with a mixture of rage and satisfaction. These primitive creatures had caused more damage to his empire than any enemy in its long history. But now they would learn the price of defying their betters. "Activate the Terminus Protocol," he commanded. "If we cannot rule this galaxy, we will ensure no one can." His subordinates began the activation sequence. Across the galaxy, ancient weapons began to charge their systems. In a few hours, they would fire simultaneously, turning every star system that had joined the rebellion into clouds of radioactive dust. But Kethtar had made one critical error. He assumed that humans would fight like every other species the WoW consortium had faced. He expected them to follow predictable tactics and respect the traditional rules of warfare. Humans had never been very good at following rules. Kelly's fleet approached the Final Authority using a tactic that no alien commander had ever encountered. Instead of fighting the defending fleet in a traditional battle, human ships simply ignored them. Using their superior speed and stealth technology, they flew straight past the consortium forces and attacked the space station directly. The alien defenders found themselves in an impossible position. They could not fire on the human ships without hitting their own fortress. By the time they realized what was happening, human troops were already boarding the Final Authority. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. Captain Kelly Brooks led her assault team through the corridors of the Final Authority, as emergency alarms screamed throughout the massive space station. The walls were covered with strange alien symbols that pulsed with red light, counting down to the activation of the Terminus Protocol. They had less than 2 hours to stop the weapons that would destroy half the galaxy. "Move fast," Kelly shouted to her troops. "Every second counts." The corridors of the station were like nothing humans had ever seen. They twisted and curved in patterns that hurt to look at, designed by minds that thought in dimensions humans could barely comprehend. But Kelly's team had trained for this mission for months, studying every detail of consortium architecture they could find. Behind them, the space battle raged as human ships fought desperately against the alien defenders. The final authority was protected by energy shields so powerful that normal weapons could not even scratch them. But human engineers had discovered that the shields had to be lowered periodically to allow ships to dock with the station. "Kelly, this is Morrison," came a voice over her communication device. "We've got problems out here. More consortium ships are arriving. How much longer do you need?" Kelly checked the tactical display on her armor. The control center was still 12 levels away, and they were facing heavy resistance from alien security forces. "Give us 30 minutes, she replied, knowing it was probably impossible. The consortium defenders were fighting with the desperation of creatures who knew their empire was ending. These were not ordinary soldiers, but the elite guard that protected the Supreme Overlord himself. They wore armor that could deflect human weapons and carried energy shields that made them nearly invincible. But humans had learned something important during their war against the consortium. When facing superior technology, the answer was not to fight fair, it was to fight dirty. Sergeant Tom Bradley led his squad around the alien defenders using maintenance tunnels that were barely large enough for humans, while the aliens focused. On the main assault, Tom's team struck from behind using weapons designed specifically to penetrate their armor. "Remember," Tom told his men, "these things murdered billions of our people. No prisoners." The battle through the station was brutal and chaotic. Human soldiers used every dirty trick they had learned during decades of guerrilla warfare. They turned the station's own systems against the defenders, overloading power conduits to create explosions and rerouting life support to flood sections with toxic gas. Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked frantically in her laboratory on Earth, trying to understand the alien technology that controlled the Terminus weapons. Even with captured consortium equipment, the ancient systems were incredibly complex. "Amy," called her assistant Mark Chen, "we're receiving telemetry from Kelly's team. They've reached the outer control chambers." Amy studied the data streaming. From the assault team's equipment, the Terminus protocol was controlled by a central computer that was millions of years old, far more advanced than anything the current consortium could build. But age had its weaknesses. "Mark, send this to Kelly." "Immediately," Amy said, uploading a data packet. "The control system has a vulnerability. If they can access the primary interface, I can hack it from here." Kelly received the data as her team fought through the final defensive positions. The control center was just ahead, protected by massive doors that looked like they could withstand a nuclear explosion. But Dr. Rodriguez's information showed a way to bypass the defenses entirely. "Tom, get your demolition charges ready," Kelly ordered. "We're going through the wall." The explosion that followed shook the entire space station. When the smoke cleared, Kelly's team found themselves in a chamber that defied human understanding. The room was vast and filled with floating crystals that pulsed with energy. At the center stood a control interface that looked like it had been grown rather than built. And standing before it was Overlord Kethtar himself. The supreme leader of the consortium was tall and thin, like all his species, but his skin had a metallic sheen that spoke of centuries of genetic modification. His eyes were black holes that seemed to absorb light, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Humans," he said, the word dripping with contempt. "You have caused more damage to my empire than any species in galactic history. But your rebellion ends here." Kelly raised her weapon, but Kethtar moved faster than any human could follow. Energy crackled around his hands as he activated personal shields that made him nearly untouchable. Behind him, the Terminus protocol continued its countdown. 15 minutes remaining. "You think you can defeat me?" Kethtar continued. "I have ruled this galaxy for over 1,000 years. I have conquered civilizations that you cannot even imagine. What are you compared to that?" Kelly's reply was simple and direct. "We're humans. We don't give up." The fight that followed was like nothing in recorded history. Kethtar moved with superhuman speed, his energy weapons carving through solid metal like it was air. But Kelly's team fought with the fury of a species that had been pushed beyond its breaking point. Tom Bradley tackled the alien overlord directly, his powered armor protecting him from energy blasts that would have vaporized an unprotected human. Other team members flanked the alien leader, using coordinated tactics that forced him to divide his attention. "Kelly!" Tom shouted as he grappled with Kethtar. "Get to the controls! I can't hold him long!" Kelly ran toward the central interface, as energy beams filled the air around her. The alien control system was like nothing she had ever seen, but Dr. Rodriguez's instructions were clear. She placed her hand on the crystalline surface and activated the human hacking device. Back on Earth, Amy Rodriguez felt the connection establish itself across impossible distances. Her consciousness seemed to merge with the ancient alien computer, and for a moment she experienced the galaxy as the consortium saw it. Billions of species reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet, entire civilizations existing only to serve the masters who had conquered them. "Not anymore," Amy whispered, and began to tear the system apart from the inside. The effect was immediate. Throughout the galaxy, the ancient terminus weapons began to shut down. The countdown that had been racing toward galactic genocide simply stopped. Warning lights flashed as safety systems that had been dormant for millions of years suddenly activated. Kethtar felt his empire dying and screamed in rage. He threw Tom aside and lunged toward Kelly, determined to kill the human who had destroyed everything he had built. But he had forgotten about the rest of Kelly's team. Sergeant Maria Santos, who had lost her entire family in the destruction of New Texas, stepped into his path. Her weapon fired once, and the supreme overlord of the consortium fell to the floor of his own control center. "That's for my kids," Maria said quietly. The space battle outside was ending as well. Without central coordination, the consortium fleet began to surrender or retreat. Their empire was collapsing as species after species declared independence and joined the Free Species Alliance. President Ryan Walsh received the news on Earth and immediately opened communications with every world in the galaxy. The message he broadcast would be remembered for thousands of years. "To all species in all systems," he began, "the consortium empire is ended. The age of slavery and oppression is over. The Free Species Alliance offers membership to any world that accepts our principles. No species shall dominate another. Technology and knowledge shall be shared freely, and the galaxy shall be governed by cooperation, not conquest." The response was overwhelming. Worlds that had been enslaved for millennia sent messages of gratitude and requests to join the alliance. Even some former consortium species, horrified by their leaders' willingness to commit galactic genocide, requested membership. Kelly stood in the ruined control center of the Final Authority, looking at the body of the alien overlord who had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years. Around her, her team was securing the station and ensuring that the terminus weapons could never be reactivated. "Kelly," came Morrison's voice over the communication system, "Earth wants to know what you want us to do with the surrendering consortium forces." Kelly thought about all the humans who had died, all the species that had suffered under alien rule, all the children who would now grow up free because of what they had accomplished. "Treat them fairly," she replied. "We're not conquerors, we're liberators. That has to mean something." Months later, Kelly found herself standing in the assembly hall of the new galactic government on the neutral world of Haven. Representatives from over 200 species sat together, working to build a civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. The consortium's former slaves were learning to govern themselves. Former enemies were becoming allies, and humanity, the species that had said enough to tyranny, had become the symbol of freedom throughout the galaxy. President Walsh addressed the assembly as they voted to formally establish the Free Species Alliance. "We did not fight this war to replace one empire with another," he said. "We fought to ensure that no species would ever again have to kneel before masters who saw them as less than equals. Today, we prove that different species can work together, can respect each other, and can build something better than what came before."